just to tell you who I've spoken to. So I've done an interview with James Roberts, interview with Pam Tracy, with Christos, and also with Chris Kelly as well, just to get different people's perspectives on what it meant. And also think since I last spoke to you as well, we sort of refined our question to 3 main areas, which were, why do businesses embark on using apprenticeships in the first place? What business problem are they trying to solve? Which I think you've got awesome insight into. And then how do they go about making changes to their business, organizationally, training wise, salaries, career progression, whatever that might look like, to make sure these programs work for the business and for the apprentices. And then the last one, which I don't think we talked on at all last time, was how, if they do, is the success of these programs measured? So that was a really interesting one. So that's the 3 areas. The way we've been running these interviews then is, because I've kind of know Auto Trader and I tend to know too much detail, I'll let Cam do the question and answering for the most bit, and then I can jump in if I think of something. And then what we try to do is, it's very unstructured. We just do sort of 10 minutes on each of those themes and then see where it takes us. All right, Cam, over to you.
Okay. Hi, Alison. Thank you very much for joining us. Tim, do you want to move the mic over a little bit? Because I can't hear what Alison is saying at all. Sorry about that.
Okay.
Yeah, so Alison, thank you very much for joining us. Do you want to just say something so I can hear you?
That's gone completely off.
Hello, can you hear me now?
Much better.
Okay,
Perfect.
I need to be directional, clearly.
So like Tim was saying, we are the last part of our MBA now, just doing the dissertation, and we've decided to do our project on the skill shortage and apprenticeship scheme in the Northwest especially. We think that this is a really important subject because very often it just overloads, and there's always been a snobbery in Britain about doing apprenticeship isn't as valuable as
very much so.
Getting a degree. And we know that there is a massive skills gap that can be addressed by using apprenticeship. And it doesn't necessarily mean to have graduates. Some of the interviews that we've had, some of the reviews, literature reviews that we've looked at, also suggests graduates are good with certain skills during university, but it might not necessarily give the organizations the exact thing that they need, so they have to be retrained anyway. We also know that there is a patchy standard of apprenticeship schemes in the UK, and from different European literature, we know that organizations with a lot of workforce with vocational degrees tend to have higher productivity, but that doesn't always link back into profitability. So that's why we decided to do this project, to figure out how we can offer advice to other organizations using apprenticeship schemes or looking to use apprenticeship schemes. Like Tim was saying, we have 3 themes to the research. Number 1, why did the organization choose to use apprenticeship scheme? The second theme is, what changes in terms of the organization from a human resource perspective or organizational policy do they have to be changed to fit the apprentice and for the apprentice to fit into the organization? And finally, how do organizations measure their performance? What's valuable to you? How does that impact the individual as the apprentice, and how do the apprentice impact the organization? But Tim will say we want to make this interactive, so if there's anything that I'm not being very clear about, please just let me know and I try to give you a bit more detail. So if it's okay, should we start?
Yeah, absolutely.
Cool. So can you give us a little bit of background about your involvement with Auto Trader's apprenticeship scheme?
Yeah, so I think we started to take on our first apprentices probably 3 or 4 years ago. At that time, I was running the infrastructure and operations area. There'd always been strong grad intake. Well, for a long time, there'd been strong grad intake at Auto Trader. But in the operations area, we felt that grads probably weren't right for us, actually, because it's a kind of area where experience counts for a lot, and there's not really much of a fast track, which today's graduates very much expect. There's kind of entry level jobs that you've got to strive at really to learn your craft. So we thought that maybe apprentices would be a kind of more appropriate skill pool. People who were passionate about getting into technology, but maybe didn't have the high expectations of an accelerated career that some of our grads had. And beyond that, I had a very strong personal conviction that apprentices would be it would be a good thing to do, actually, that to invest in younger people who maybe who are probably from a more diverse background than our graduates would be the right thing to do. We had an HR colleague at the time in recruitment who was an ex-apprentice herself, so was also quite passionate about it.
Yeah.
So there was a lot of convincing to do in terms of the hiring managers in that area. They felt that it would just be too much effort required, but we decided that we would do a pilot scheme, take on a couple, and see how it went. And actually, it went very well. So I think we took 3 apprentices initially, and they all did very well. So then we continued to look at our kind of entry level roles across technology, with a view to, could we put an apprentice in there? As time has progressed, we've realised that actually apprentices, it is very different to bringing graduates on, but if the desire to learn is there and the capability is there, then they can absolutely thrive at Autotrader. So in conjunction with Manchester Digital, we've decided to expand that scheme and see if it can apply also to software development.
With the hiring managers that thought probably a bit too much work to hire the apprentices, what are the thoughts now? Has it changed their mind?
Yeah, definitely. So Dave White, who runs our kind of operational area, who was definitely skeptical, he's now done at least one video for the National Apprenticeship Service, kind of, singing the praises of taking on apprentices, actually. So yeah, he's a real convert, and he's had a couple of he's had at least one failure in the years subsequently, but he's still very, he's absolutely a believer now.
Operationally, with because you mentioned the infrastructure and the operations of the organisation, did you feel that you had to make any particular changes to the way Autotrader is run in order to get the apprentices into the business and get them kind of working to do the things that you guys need them to do?
Yeah, so we thought that we would have to make a lot more allowances than we actually ended up making. So a key part of that role is that you go on call. So you're responsible for making sure the operations of a very busy and lucrative website are kept going overnight, for instance. So we assumed that we wouldn't be able to put the apprentices on call for maybe years, because it's such a position of responsibility, and it can be quite lonely. You've got to have quite a level of maturity to handle that responsibility. But actually, I think in all cases, well within a year, they had the necessary maturity and skills to go on call. So yeah, actually, they do better than you think they're going to, I would say.
And with the on call, am I thinking of literally sitting in the office in the comms room or something like that, making sure that the servers are up or ticking?
Yeah, basically. I mean, they do it from home, but yeah, it's absolutely that. They'll get an alert at 3 o'clock in the morning, an automated alert to say that some key services have gone down for whatever reason, and they've got to start investigating that incident, do what they can to get the site back online, and potentially escalate that incident. I mean, it doesn't happen often, but when things do go wrong, they tend to go very wrong. So it's as I say, it's a position of great responsibility, because it's obviously important to Autotrader that those sites are all up and running, and we do trust apprentices with that job.
Do you think if it wasn't apprentices, would you train them up differently if they were graduates? Would they have got to the same level at the same rate? Or?
Yeah, so we never did. Well, no, we have had a couple of graduates. Yeah, I don't think we found much difference in the end. I think in terms of technical ability, the ability to absorb information, to learn, to get to grips with the systems, all the kind of the technical skill set, I don't think we see much difference. Where you do see a difference, essentially, is work readiness and maturity. There's more to learn there because they've just not had so much experience of life. So something like communication skills or influencing skills, things that you know probably through 3 years of university you pick up a bit, they're often not as skilled in those areas. And I think our approach up to now has just been to be aware of that, make sure colleagues and line managers are aware of that and not try to explicitly manage it. With our new software development scheme, actually, we're going to take those learnings and very specifically train apprentices in those skills and not just the technical stuff.
So if I'm understanding this right, initially it was Auto Trader's job to not emphasize on those points but be aware of it, and now it's almost like the other way around. Get the apprentices to understand what they need to do so that it kind of mix back into the organization a bit easier.
That's right. Yeah.
Okay. And is there anything else that you feel that you guys have to do to make it work for the apprentices, apart from the soft skills, that aspect? Are there anything else that's really jumped out at you in terms of getting the guys ready, giving the training that they need, or changing the way you guys operate for them to feel comfortable in the organisation?
So I think the roles that they were going into, wherever you came from and however much experience you had elsewhere, because of the nature of the Auto Trader technology stack, everybody's tech environment is unique to a certain extent. So we would always expect to give a lot of training. So I think those roles have been very well suited to apprenticeships. Particularly as we would take people with only a couple of years experience generally into those roles. They're a good springboard role. I think so. No, really, I think moving into the level 4 apprenticeships, I think that's very different. I think we have to do. I think the expectations in the area of Auto Trader where we'll be placing those apprentices tend to be an awful lot higher. So I think we'll have to do a lot to manage the expectation of the squads that they're joining, of the teams that they're going to join, actually. So I think we need to give the apprentice explicit training in how we work in a digital environment, collaboration, communication, those kind of things, but also be very, very mindful of making sure that the squads don't have realistic expectations of the skill level and the maturity level of the people coming in, and treat them appropriately. But I think that's, whereas those squads are just, I think they're used to having very, very good people join and hit the ground running, which won't be the case.
So what about setting the expectation of the apprentices in terms of what's required from them?
So we've so the assessment days that we've run have been very comprehensive. So we think that we're recruiting well, that we're pulling apprentices out of the pool who'll be very suited to Auto Trader and will be able to take the pace of the organisation. I think our plan is to just put a lot of support around the apprentices. So aside from the sort of formal training that they'll be getting, we're going to assign a coach, which will be someone that they work very closely with in the squad, will be responsible for their technical development. We're also going to assign them a mentor to make sure that sort of pastoral care side of things is being looked after, and also make sure that their line manager, who'll be a sort of another third person, has very much got their got their eye on what's going on with that apprentice. So I think we are going to wrap them in cotton wool, really, to make sure that they get the very best experience that they can have, and that we just give them the best chance of success at Auto Trader.
And how would you guys review or measure the performance of Autotrader as an organization in terms of the support that it's giving and delivering to the apprentices? And similarly, how would you measure their performance?
Yeah, so both good questions. So in terms of their performance, for in the past with the apprenticeships, we've just kind of we've very much played it by ear, and we've got an idea of what decent progression looks like, and hope that they match it. For the software development apprenticeships, it's going to be much more structured, actually. So we've got a reasonably thought out learning journey that takes them from the standard that they were at the assessment centre through the boot camps over a 2-year period, and we've got a mapped out view of where they should be, what they should have, what skills they should have, both technical and soft, at various points over those 2 years. And we'll be obviously working with the coaches and the line managers to make sure that the apprentices are hitting those marks. If they're not, then we need to work out what additional support they get. But this is very much so that no one falls behind. Much as you expect people's levels of progression to vary and people's learning speeds to be different, to make sure that there are milestones that they're hitting, or else we probably need to make an intervention.
And
so
how often
it's going to be much more structured. Sorry?
How often would the milestones be reviewed, or are they set in a specific, like 6 monthly, quarterly, or?
Yeah, they're kind of yes. It's a bit mix and match, but it's basically quarterly.
Okay, and I guess with the milestones, it gives the organisation time to reflect on the effort that's put into the apprentices, as well as the other way around.
Yeah.
Have you guys ever thought about looking at the latent ability of the apprentices, like what can they achieve if you were to speed up the system? Could they have done a lot more, make it quicker, to tailor it back to the individual rather than having the set program?
Yeah, so that's a good question. Ultimately, they're in a cohort, so there's 4 at Autotrader and probably another 8 to 10 in other businesses. They're a cohort. We have to manage, not exactly we have to manage to the average, I suppose, to make sure that boot camps and the formal training that we're doing hits kind of the most utility for the most people. I would expect there to be some superstars who forge ahead, and it's you would very much hope that their mentors and their coaches and their line managers support that, give them additional work and give them additional resources. And it's the nature of it, isn't it? The people who study at home and who try and progress faster. It's certainly been the case for the most talented apprentices that we've had. Much as they were initially joined us on some sort of 3-year apprenticeship program, they've been off the apprenticeship and just had a kind of normal job with us within 18 months, really, because they progressed so fast. So
do you
necessarily expect all of these people to finish their apprenticeships? I think it may become not relevant for them if they really forge ahead.
Do you think that, actually, let me reword that. Do you see the possibility of the apprentices really supporting each other, where the ones that are falling behind, you kind of give them a hand?
Yeah, so that's an important plank of this program. We're really hoping that we get a benefit from having a cohort that's spread across, I think, probably 5 or 6 different businesses, but we're hoping that they have a strong group identity, and that they can all learn from the different business experiences that those apprentices will be getting. They will be, it's a small group, they'll spend a lot of time together, so yeah, you would expect those bonds to form like they do in any sort of cohort class environment. I think that's important, actually. And similarly,
sorry, do these guys go and do they have off-site training as well? I think they do, don't they?
Yeah. So this is the trouble with apprenticeships generally, in a way, is that there's a formal training element. There's a kind of assessment framework that you've got to hit, boxes to be ticked. against a framework, and it all kind of makes sense, but it's quite the software development one is quite traditional in its approach. But yeah, instead of sort of outsourcing it to a training provider, as normally happens, just to get those boxes ticked, the companies who are taking on apprentices under this program are going to deliver the training, and it's kind of in a boot camp type format. So it's 3 days of training every 2 months together.
Yes. See if you can hear me. That's right. Software development as an apprentice type, is that something that the criteria for has been developed by the government, or have we kind of just said, actually, apprenticeships are available, here's a role that we think we could fill with apprenticeships? Okay.
So there is a industry got together and put the frame, and were invited by the government on some level.
Yeah.
To put the framework together, and that's the framework that we're now. It's called Trailblazer something or other.
Yeah.
And but it's loose enough. We think anyway that we can deliver a kind of an apprenticeship that focuses on a kind of digital technology stack, and still meet the standard
criteria.
Yeah. But it is a bit.
And why do you think now for apprentices for software developers? So it sounds like the government have given this criteria, which is great, but equally industries sort of starting to identify this as an alternate route. Why now?
Everything that's sort of legislative, like the tax code or education generally, it seems to change quite frequently, which is quite difficult for employers, I think, actually. But it changes quite frequently, and apprenticeships definitely seem to have been on a bit of a journey. So they were initially very prescriptive and very off-putting, actually. So the ones that we've had, you get your list of kind of technical apprenticeships. None of them really match the jobs that you have, and you just kind of pick one and you send them off for training. But really, that all of the benefits are going to be delivered in-house. That has improved. So the new apprenticeships are employer-led, they're industry designed, which has made them and they are more flexible. So it's made them better. I think employers are coming around to apprenticeships because they work, actually, because there are success stories, and I think you're getting a bit of, I'll certainly be an advocate for it, and I think there are other advocates for it, and I think it is an answer to the very difficult question of of bringing loyal talent into your business.
Do you think that if university education do you think that if university education is still free, people go down the route of the apprenticeship?
I have wondered about this. So I think there's a crossover now that so it was previously very much. I think the original concept of apprenticeships is very much around vocational stuff, wasn't it? So it was around beauty and bricklaying, and I think that's where the heritage.
Hands-on stuff.
Yeah, that's where the heritage of apprenticeships are. And I think really, it has turned out that there's a lot of value to the system beyond those kind of traditional, hands-on industries. I think what you are getting is a new type of people who previously wouldn't have considered it, who would have gone to university by default, are now considering an apprenticeship. I actually think that's a good thing. I think the whatever your kind of feelings on the fee paying structure of the university, is it necessary? for huge percentage of the population to come away with a degree in order for UK business to be productive? Probably not. So I think that apprenticeships are getting a wider audience is good. I think there's still an issue with parents. Parents are not keen. Like middle class parents want their kids to go to university.
They're still thinking of the old way of doing it as well, aren't they? And I think it was on the news recently. Wasn't there some advert for apprenticeship schemes recently on telly?
Yeah, I thought they've been quite good. I've seen a couple, and I think they're quite good because I think they do explicitly address that the fear that particularly middle class parents have, that only apprenticeships are like shipbuilding and stuff and not software development. But I think the reality of going through university and coming out with a 40 grand debt or whatever the hell it is these days might make people think again. And there is no requirement that I can really think of for a software developer to have a degree, really. Like there's no, and as we know with technology, it's very difficult. It's always
difficult progressive as well, isn't it? Because you're always
very
learning
difficult
new things.
to keep up. Yeah.
To
make those curricula relevant.
One of the articles I read recently in The Economist, it was talking about apprenticeships is cheap and cheerful, because for some organisations, they're just using apprentices as cheap labour.
I'm sure that's true.
And I've also seen something else on YouTube recently. They were doing a dog walking apprenticeship with Portsmouth University.
That's outrageous.
Earning £2.73.
That's outrageous anyway.
Which is crazy. So how do you guys address the fairness and making sure that your apprentices are being used properly? Is it part of the program that's been designed, and setting the expectation of the apprentice in terms of what they want out of it, and whether it's extrinsic stuff like money or intrinsic stuff like career progression? How do you guys address that?
Yes, it's a good question, I guess. So the apprentices were very much selected on their current ability, but also their desire to have a long-term career in technology, and like clearly that they have the desire to do that. I mean, there was lots of lovely stories about like the girl who'd been building computers since she was 6, kind of thing, all of that stuff. In terms of the Manchester digital program, we are going out of our way to make sure that employers' expectations are reasonable and that they're paying a minimum of the living wage, for instance. And I think, generally speaking, in software and technology, your pay bill's kind of high. It's not bums on seats in that sense. You're paying for expertise. So really, the thing you're trying to conquer, particularly with smaller businesses, is making them believe that they've got the capacity to take on an apprentice. It doesn't tend to be about money in that sense. It's not. Technology is just not a sweatshop kind of environment, really, is it? It's a different thing. However, in other industries, you can imagine that it's maybe a little bit less altruistic in that sense.
Sorry, Tim, were you going to say something? I interrupted you earlier, I think.
I think the levy might make that worse, by the way. I do worry about the apprenticeship levy a bit.
Why?
Because if you don't, because businesses are being incentive. So I think it's like, what is it, 0.5% of your pay bill or something. Yeah. So if you don't, so clearly the idea is that it'll encourage businesses to spend money on apprenticeships, which it will, but it possibly will also encourage businesses to spend money inappropriately on apprenticeships. So our apprenticeship levy, because we've got quite a high pay bill relative to the size of our workforce, will be, it would be more apprentices than we could ever hope to take on. So that's, at that point, it's just a tax. So
Okay.
I think it depends on the nature of your business. But I know that there's companies, or some of the kind of the training providers, kind of going out and giving advice on how you can turn your jobs into apprenticeship jobs.
I was going to
Slightly
ask you,
cynically.
because I've seen the authorized training providers, they are giving that advisory position to companies, saying you can have apprenticeships across any job, any roles, and then because you just need the different type of training. To me, that's just playing the system.
Yeah,
you might not be bending the rules, but knowing when to apply.
Yeah, so I think
I don't think it's a good thing.
I think there's an element of grey to it, which most companies will, because the hope is you're a company that's never really considered apprenticeships before. You realise you've got to pay the levy. You start looking into it. You take some advice, and you think, actually, it's perfectly possible to take apprentices on. We need to make these changes in our business. Great. Obviously, the dark side to that is you turn all your warehouse jobs into apprenticeships or something in order to spend your money. And I think I would imagine the rules will have to be slightly tightened up over time to prevent any kind of abuses. I think the apprenticeship system has always been, because there's always money sloshing around, so there's always been some kind of outliers, really. Specifically the businesses that employ apprentices in order to train them but don't necessarily have jobs for them at the end. I think that kind of thing is a bit suboptimal.
Absolutely, because there are references that I've read recently about exactly that. Just because you hire an apprentice doesn't mean that you guarantee them a job at the end. And similarly for the apprentices, because they are cheap labour, or some organisations think they're cheap labour, they would just keep churning the apprentices just to get that cheap labour in, and they just completely destroy the model. Yeah,
there are definitely some examples of poor practice. So all you can do is look after your own, backyard. So in the case of the Manchester Digital Apprenticeship, we're being very clear what the expectations on employers are, and one of those expectations is it's a real job. That doesn't disappear after 2 years when your funding goes. There's, everybody is going into it with the hope that those apprentices will stay with the businesses for, at least the medium term.
Because you guys work together in Manchester Digital as a whole, if you come across any organisations that are really taking the piss, how would you guys react to that organisation? Would they? So
we would not allow them on the scheme, probably, if there was any concerns. But if they were on the scheme, then we would do our best to intervene. And probably it'll be a question of helping that employer with the resources that they need to run their program internally. That's the most likely outcome. I think it's one of the no one want to do a bad job thing. But certainly we consider ourselves to have a duty to make sure that all the apprentices get the best possible experience. Yeah, because I'm thinking for the young adults, for the apprentices, they can do the apprenticeship scheme with somebody who's well known within Manchester Digital, within an umbrella that's well known for doing the right thing, and they can pick and choose, and it's almost like a certified approval. Yeah, that's right. So as an organisation, we did think very long and hard about the possible reputational damage of getting this wrong, actually, because you just wouldn't want to be associated with yet another bad apprenticeship scheme, of which there have been many. But that's why we're keeping it small. We know the employers involved very well, and there's been a lot of collaboration from the community. So I think we've put in all the safety nets we can do, actually, for that very reason.
I'm going to do a question. So on that light, then, Manchester Digital as the brand behind the apprenticeships, is that right? So it's going to be the brand almost. And one of the things that we spoke to BAE is they do a lot of marketing of their apprentice program. Do you know if we've done anything like that or plans to?
Yeah, so Manchester Digital is marketing it. We spent, I don't know, 5-6 grand, I think, probably on marketing, which for Manchester Digital's got a lot of money.
Yeah.
So there's been going into, so mainly that's taken the form of contacting our employer members, but then it's also the marketing into schools.
Yes.
Yeah, which is where the money's gone, to make sure that people who are doing computer science A-level and whatever are aware of it, and that has worked. We've had lots of applications from kind of people who currently in sixth form, whatever they call that now. So the quality of the applicants we've had has been really pleasing. We've I think put about somewhere between 50 and 60 people through assessment centres, and we've got sort of 20 very, very solid applicants from that process, and pleasingly from a really diverse background. Really pleasingly.
Oh, Cam, if you're pause. So, why do you think the businesses within that Manchester Digital community, why have they chosen to go down the apprentice route? So we talked about the levy, talked about a little bit about the type of skills required.
Yeah.
At each of their businesses, how would the relative kind of sponsor of the project be describing, this is why we just need to do it?
So, talent pipeline.
Right.
So, any time 2 or more tech employers get together, that is what you end up talking about. There are conferences, and it's the hottest topic really. So the Manchester Digital position is, well, we can bitch about it and wait for the city, stroke the council, stroke government to swoop in and do something, or we can try and take control of our own destiny a little bit. And this is a very obvious, I was going to say easy, it's absolutely not easy, but it's a very obvious way of starting to address that problem. As a city, we need to retain, we absolutely need to retain our, we need to start attracting people from London, that kind of thing. But, apprentices, it's a thing that we can do. So that is absolutely the pitch. It's just not more complicated than that.
What's your greatest fear with the program apart from failing?
What's the greatest fear for the program apart from failing? That it fails. So employers, lots of tech employers have had bad experiences with apprentices. That's absolutely the case. Poor training provision, poor quality of candidates. So lots of employers have said, we can see it's a good idea, but we tried it, it was bad, we're not doing it again. And then Manchester Digital has used its relationship with the employers to say, we hear you, we've had these problems as well, but basically we're underwriting it to say that this time is going to be different. Actually, we're going to look after the quality and the training is going to be great. And I would hate for us to get to the end of 2 years and those employers are still not convinced and they wouldn't do it again. That, we did missell it, I think, because I think all the building blocks are there, but employers have to understand and have to undertake the changes that we've talked about. You don't get a fully formed human on day one. You have to understand that apprentice is going to grow with you over time and to have realistic expectations. So I just really hope that we've managed to land that message. I think cohort of 14, if 2 years from now, 9 to 10 are still with us, then that will be great. And are doing well and are moving on to jobs. I will consider that successful.
I think that's really important what you just said, setting the right expectation for the organisations themselves to understand the journey of the apprentices, because it's not a case of, you know, you can just do it overnight for everybody just to be on the same page. And that's why we're very keen to understand what makes it work, what are the potential pitfalls, or the things that, you know, organizations have done, like, you know, what BAE have managed to achieve. And I think Tom was talking about having apprentices that's been there for 10 years, got to director level, and then another 10 years, they will have apprentices that's gone to the, you know, the senior exec level.
Yeah.
Does that type of long-term view fit into the Auto Trader organization, do you think? I think that's specific to companies.
I would certainly hope so. I mean, certainly, one of the original apprentices we took on here is absolutely streaking ahead. So, you know, you could certainly see that there will be apprentices who will have incredible career trajectories within Auto Trader and within other businesses. I think for the software development apprentices, it will be quite easy to track whether it's been successful or not, as we've got quite a structured career progression for developers. So we'll be able to see where they will get to, as we do with our grads today. You know, we know how long it takes from a grad to go to a professional, to go to a senior within our business, which is about 5 years generally. So yeah.
On that one as well. So one of the things with that BAE example was there's quite a lot of loyalty. I think they said with the graduates, and it's like 90% of them are there after 5 or 10 years, huge number.
Yeah.
However, software engineers have tended to be a bit more of a fluid career choice, probably in some ways supported by contracting being almost the default for a lot of people for a long time. How do you think that will work with apprentices? Do you think that there will still be that fluidity within Manchester as a digital scene, or actually we kind of go, no, you know, start your apprenticeship at Auto Trader and finish here in 35 years as an amazing developer?
Wow. Bit torn on this, really. I think so. Apprentices are different to graduates in their outlook, actually, and without wishing to kind of, it's a generalisation, but apprentices are generally very grateful for the opportunity. They see it as an opportunity. They do absolutely see it as an opportunity that, yes, they've worked hard for, but they consider themselves quite privileged, I think, often to get that opportunity. Whereas graduates sometimes think Auto Trader's privileged. I mean, there's a slightly different mindset. I would expect apprentices to generally be very loyal. I mean, certainly all the research shows that. But actually, it's in people's best interest if they move around a bit. I think, particularly in software development, I think it broadens you out and it increases your skill set if you experience other companies. So I think with my Manchester hat on, as long as they stay in the region, I'm happy with that. And a bit of movement between companies is good.
What if Manchester Digital becomes the IT outsourcing specialists, and then everybody just get it from Manchester Digital, you know, as a centralized resource?
I think if Manchester Digital can build on the apprenticeship year on year and be a kind of gold standard, and it's a trusted source of apprenticeship level people, that would be amazing, absolutely amazing.
And do you think that within that Manchester kind of ecosystem that we'll get some of the people like Co-ops, Bet365s, Sainsbury's, these bigger employers? Is the goal to get them involved, or will you think they'll have their own apprentice programs?
So very hopeful. I'm very hopeful that all the employees you mentioned there will come on. I think Co-op are minded to do their own thing because of their sheer scale. but actually, I don't know why they would. You know, I'm not quite sure what they would gain. But having said that, the more the merrier, really.
Like a really interesting question, because it is sort of this, how much do you do yourself internalize? So you kind of say, we'll internalize some of the training and some of the skills development because these bits universities are not getting right, but actually almost still then saying, but you know what, there's something about being a brand for training in and itself, as opposed to Auto Trader's brand that Manchester Digital can bring, that we wouldn't want to try and recreate ourselves, because we just, the effort, investment, the scale would be just too great.
For a co-op. Well, actually, I'm not sure that, I mean, co-op and Sainsbury's and Bet365 are all in the same position, whereby actually they have aspiration to bring on hundreds and hundreds of developer roles, because that's not where they are right now. At the moment, they're more in the dozens or the tens. So actually, they're going to have exactly the same issue as any employer does, which to absorb lots of apprentices is really, really hard. So the clubbing together thing does make sense. Plus I do believe you'll end up with better, more rounded apprentices. It's about control, though, really, I think, probably. Yeah, so Manchester Digital exists to promote the best interests of our membership, which entirely means making sure that Manchester is a viable tech cluster with everything that means, which means that it's attracting investment, it's attracting funding, that we're getting the right level of infrastructure investment from the city. It's slightly a lobbying organisation, I guess. It's trying to make sure that the health of the ecosystem is maintained for the benefit of all the members, really. Manchester, I mean, as an organisation, Manchester Digital is by far the most active of the kind of the digital trade type organisations. It's got a long heritage, and Manchester is quite special, really, in that it's big enough to have a broad membership, but it's still small enough that there's a real, unlike London, there's a sort of real sense of community. And Manchester Digital do a good job in stitching that all together. I think it's great if larger corporates want to become involved, but you can't take over either. It's one of those. It's interesting. See how it develops.
Right. Cam, I'm mindful we've only got 5 minutes left and we haven't really touched on the measuring the success. Do you want to go on to that?
I think we kind of have, because with Auto Trader, it's all about the program, especially on the software engineering bit. It's all about the program that you guys have put together, looking at the milestones, the performance in the review, knowing very well exactly where the candidates are going to be at the end of that training period.
Yes, I'm more thinking of the macro level. How do you measure a good ecosystem? How do you measure, and maybe that's where it's not our business specific, but maybe it's bigger and broader than that. And how does that fit into it all?
You're gonna have to try again on that question.
Right. So how do you know if you've got a really good ecosystem? So how do we know whether we are attracting more skilled people to the area, investment, and is that important for us to measure, or is that just sort of anecdotally we'll feel it and sense it?
So I think it's really important. I think it's really important clearly it's important for the health of Auto Trader that we can access great talent. That there's kind of two ways, really, which is we can outpay everybody. I mean, and some companies will do that, right? So clearly the bigger you are, the deeper your pockets are likely to be. So you can just overpay everybody, or outpay everybody and get what you need. Clearly, we believe that's self-defeating in the end. So the other way is to behave responsibly, and try and ideally along with other businesses, do our bit in making sure that Manchester is an attractive destination for people to relocate to, or to stay to, or to do their apprenticeships. I think measuring it is hard, and it's difficult for us to distinguish what's the results of our own efforts as Auto Trader, and because we've got a very good resourcing team who go out and fish in a lot of pools and are not afraid to go internationally or whatever in order to get the kind of people that we need, and what part of it is just kind of the Manchester pull factor. Anecdotally, I do interview people who are relocating, and for whatever reason they want to come to the Northwest. So yeah, tough question. Yeah, quite. Yeah. I mean, I think last week Manchester came the top of the best place British city and the best place to live thing, and that's based on a load of factors, isn't it? It's like infrastructure and cost of living and jobs and that kind of thing, and it's rubbish in a way, presumably. So I'm sure Barnstable or something is absolutely lovely, but I think Manchester does get that attention. It does get that press. I think it is the second city, really. So if people don't fancy London, then Manchester's a good shout. So I think what I can say is we absolutely made the right decision moving from Newton to Bloody Willows. I know that much. And lots of other companies are making that same calculation. So there's definitely a gravity thing happening. Or Newton.
I don't have any more questions.
Okay.
Thank you very much for your time.
Yeah, you're welcome.
Bye.
I'll look forward to reading it.
You will get paid, absolutely, even early editions of it. And thank you for sending all that stuff over. All right, thanks, Alison. Cam, I'll speak to you later on, but thank you for that.
I'll give you a call.